I know we've only known each other for 4 weeks and 3 days, but to me, it seems like 9 weeks and 5 days.
All right. Welcome. It's Sunday, all of my garden enthusiasts and passionate plant people, and welcome to Let's Get Growing, your weekly gardening live cast right here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch. I'm your host here for the show today, and we've got a great show for you today because today is the second Sunday of the month, and each second Sunday of the month we have with us, really fortunate to have with us our really good friend Scott Wilson from the Gardener Scott channel here today to answer all of your gardening questions. So I hope you guys have some questions, lots and lots of questions. Let's keep this conversation rolling along today. Give us some good questions that you've got from your garden, and we'll get them answered for you right here today with our good friend Gardener Scott. I always look forward to these second Sundays of the month. Scott's one of my favorite people on YouTube, one of our greatest supporters here for our channel, and it's just so awesome to get together with him each and every month nowadays, kind of catch up on what's going on in the garden, answer your garden questions, just have a really fun gardening conversation. Yeah, so really awesome to have him with us here. So definitely stay tuned for that here just a little bit here later in the show. Also, if you didn't tune in yesterday, check out yesterday's show. We had our good friend Bevan Cohen joining with us from Small House Farm, smallhousefarm.com. He's also the host of the Seeds and Weeds podcast. Bevan was one of the first guests that we had on our show, like one of the first five. I can't remember, but one of the first five guests that we had on the show. He's someone I follow along with for many years, and he writes some really great books on talking about. His new one right now is talking about preserving food the old-fashioned way. So he kind of studied on some of the older methods of doing food preservation and wrote a really great book about all of those sort of things. So definitely encourage you to go check that show out yesterday. Actually, here, let me show you real quick. This is the book, Heritage Pantry. Yeah, the Heritage Pantry. It's modern methods of preserving food the old-fashioned way. And yeah, we had a great conversation about all sorts of things, lots of seed saving talk and seed stories, garden stories, these sort of things that really are, just, fascinating takes on the past and how a lot of the food that we have today, even some of these great varieties of seeds and everything, have come to us through time and people diligently planting year in year out, and it usually brings along maybe a family story or some sort of cultural story of some sort that really makes growing your food and your plants and these different varieties even more fascinating. And it was a really great conversation with Bevan. I really encourage you to go check out yesterday's show to find out more about that as well too. And if you are here right here at the top of the show, definitely be sure to click that thumbs up, hit the like button there, as we always ask right here at the top of the show. Also subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. I can't believe you're not subscribed yet, but maybe you're just here for the first time. And if you are, hit the subscribe button. Also, there's a bell notification for everybody out there who wants to be notified, so you know when we've got some upcoming content coming, whether it's videos or more Let's Get Growing shows each and every weekend here too, on Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, definitely come subscribe, share with all your friends, and let them know about the show. Plus, one of the big things I'm talking about right now is comments. And a big, huge shout out also to all of our replay watchers, as we always ask them, jump on down into the comments section below if you're watching us on the replay, and leave a comment and let us know where you're growing, what you're growing, all sorts of things, whatever it is. Even if you just want to stop by and say say hi. I would love to hear a comment from you down below in the comments. And one of the other things about comments that we're really talking about right now too is all of our great guests like Gardner Scott. There's a link right down below too to Gardner Scott's channel, you know. So one of the cool things you can do for our show is to go to Gardner Scott's channel, go find one of his most recent videos or live streams or something like that, and go and leave him a comment and say that you saw him here on the Let's Get Growing show, and you know, kind of give us a shout out over on his videos or posts and all of that, and that kind of helps spread the word and share the collaboration, and also lets those viewers or those guests know that our viewers are watching, paying attention, and coming over and checking out the content that they have too, because that's kind of what this is all about, is sharing and building community, and that collaborative kind of effort that we all take a part in here, especially in the gardening community, is that's really what we're all out here doing, you know. And we talked a little bit about that yesterday as well too, is that we're all out here trying to share a message of growing and gardening and that sort of thing. So you know, let's do that. Let's, you know, continue to build that community around gardening, and, you know, and share and help out, and to also, you know, just, you know, make it a better place, because it's, I mean, it's a really great place, the gardening community already, but, you know, the more and more we do and take moments of our time to, you know, whether it's hitting that like button, like I said, or it's commenting or doing those sort of things with what people are doing and sharing out there, is huge. It really is. And it really makes a lot of what everybody is out there, including myself, are doing really, really worth it. It's so worth it when we know that we're, you know, that we're reaching people. And we know we're reaching people when they're reaching back at us, you know. So really, really great. And thank you all so much for being with us here today too. Definitely it looks like we got Rick joining with us right nice and bright and early from the very next day too, down there in Australia. Thanks, Rick, for joining with us here. And of course, we've got our moderator, awesome, greatest moderator on YouTube, Jay Dixon, popping in all of these great links and all of that for us here on the show. Thank you so much for joining with us as well today, and taking care of all of that for us today. And Jersey Girl, awesome to see you too. Great to have you here again. Thank you so much for joining with us. Adam, great to have you here. Good to see you here on the live stream today. Thank you, Adam, for joining with us today. Just so great to see you. All right. Let's see here, everybody. Talking up. All right, perfect. So we got lots of things going on today. I want to jump right in, and because it is Sunday, we do have our good friend Mark Moshe Colbert joining with us with a little bit of In the Garden.
Hey guys, I'm Mark Boucher Colbert, aka MBC, and you're in the garden with MBC. I'm up here again at the rooftop garden at Noble Rot in Portland, Oregon. And because we're in the height of summer today, I wanted to talk a little bit about drip irrigation, all this stuff. What is drip irrigation, or we can say micro irrigation, because we have things like micro sprinklers that use the same system. It's irrigation that's highly directed to the soil surface. Okay, so a lot of times it's actually putting drops of water on the soil surface, which are then just absorbing right into the soil. And it's a great way to both save water and to ensure that your crops are getting the water they need right where they need it. A lot of times our overhead irrigation, whether it's done through a hose or a sprinkler, may, one, evaporate in the air, two, land on leaf surfaces where it's not going to be effective unless it drips down to the soil, or three, just be watering paths and encouraging the growth of weeds where we don't want them. So drip irrigation is really targeted irrigation, it's focused irrigation, and it can be put on a timer, which is of huge benefit to the regularity with which we're watering our crops. And that kind of consistency and regularity often makes the difference between success, healthy, thriving crops, and failure, crops that are stressed by lack of consistent and or deep enough watering. So let's look at this just for a second. Like, what are the components? This is going to be a real generalized introduction because this could take a while to develop a bit of expertise with. I'm going to recommend just first, straight out of the gate, that you go to a big box store. Even though I'm not a great fan of big box stores, they do have everything spread out in the irrigation system ready for you to look at. And really, the way to get familiar with this stuff is just to spend some time with it, examine the pieces, try to figure out how they go together, look at the differences between the different kind of systems, and look at the components. Just try to ask yourself, how do these things fit together? How do I see them fitting together? What does the picture on the box tell me? Etc., etc. Like anything else, getting familiar with drip irrigation just means spending some time with it, messing around a little bit. I'm going to try to give you the basics right now, but it'll be on you to keep going after this. And of course, there's lots of tutorials. You can get a catalog. I recommend getting also the Drip Works catalog. It's a drip irrigation company out of California, I believe. And they lay out a huge array of possible products. But by looking at these catalogs and reading them, you'll get a better idea of what's going on and what might be the right system for you. We're going to look at the basic components. You need what's called a backflow preventor. That's this little device. That's going to keep water or the stuff in your drip line from being sucked back into the main water supply, whether that be a well or your city water. So the first line of defense, or the first precaution in a drip system, is always a backflow preventer. You want to get one of these. In this backflow preventer is a washer, and you're going to find a washer in all of your, every time there's a connection between two pieces of metal or two pieces of plastic, there's generally a rubber washer to ensure a tight fit. If a connection in your system is leaking, and this goes for any kind of hose system, you want to check to make sure there's a washer in there. Sometimes the washers fall out, they get old, and they either break, fall out, or just aren't doing the job. You should be inspecting and changing your washers from time to time. This one, though, performs another function. Do you see how it's got a filter screen on that? Well, guess what that filter screen is going to do? It's going to trap particles. And if it gets full of particles that it has trapped, water won't be able to go through it. So from time to time, you want to be looking at that and make sure the flow is good on your washers, especially these screen washers or filter washers. So you can just take that out, you can clean it out. Sometimes I ream it out with my finger. Sometimes I run the hose jet through in the opposite direction to blow out anything. If it's really bad, you may need like an old toothbrush or something to scrub it out, but just do that. And then when you replace the washer, put it in tightly, put the screen pointing up. That way you can grab it and take it out later on. If you put it down, it'll still do its job, but it'll be almost impossible to remove. All right, backflow preventer is always first. If your water is really turbid, if it has a lot of particles in it, you may need this extra filter system. There's a fine mesh filter that sticks into here, into this chamber. Water runs through here, gets passed through, and then comes up through the filter, and then comes down into your main line. So a filter is optional. You may or may not need that. Sometimes the little screen washers will be enough. You have to decide based on your circumstances. The next item of business, well, there's a couple of ways this could go. You may want to have some lines for drip irrigation and some lines just available to use a standard hose. I recommend some kind of a manifold. Again, you can see the little filter washer up top there. A manifold, it can be a Y with just two, kind of looks like the shape of a Y. This one is a 4-station manifold, and each one can be controlled independently. You can put drip right onto that, and then you can have one or two ready for a standard hose. That's your choice, depends on what you want to do. Sometimes I'll show you a timer can have the same manifold style, so I have 4 possible options here. I could run 3 electronically and then just have one that I can operate manually with this control. So that's possible too. I usually do like to have at least one port available for standard irrigation. And what I mean by that is just hooking up a hose and hosing down something, or fill in a bucket of water, whatever. All right, once we've got a couple of possible ports, or at least one, we're going to put on a pressure reducer. Generally, your water pressure is too high for drip systems. They will get overwhelmed and kind of blown out. So the pressure reducer is going to take the pressure down to about 30 psi. I think my home system runs somewhere between 60 and 80. So that's too strong. A lot of the fittings will blow out, or the little micro soaker hoses will just start spraying and break eventually. So a pressure reducer for each line of drip. If you want, you could also put it up here and just reduce the whole pressure of everything. But then that will slow down the flow if you're trying to use a regular hose. Anyway, put it where you like, but you need a pressure reducer. So far we have this backflow preventer. We may or may not have additional filtration. And then we have pressure reducer going to, let me now bend down and get this part. Here I am, I'm back. This is going to be a connector, a hose end connector. And right now I have to admit there's a problem here. In irrigation equipment, we have two kinds of threading. Threading are the grooves that allow pieces of irrigation equipment to connect with each other. Hose thread and pipe thread. Pipe thread has many more grooves per inch than hose thread does, and they are incompatible. This, I made a mistake. This is a pipe thread system that I bought, and this is a hose thread system. And if you try to screw them together, they will start and then they will not go much further after the start. That is not a problem with you. That is a problem with the design, because the systems are incompatible. One of the biggest errors, I think, in this kind of plumbing and drip irrigation stuff is the inability to tell hose thread and pipe thread apart. You're gonna have to just look at them and get a visual on it and get a feel for it. There's usually a label on this. There's oftentimes a sticker on this kind of equipment that says hose thread and pipe thread, but it's good to just get a visual on it. That's why I say stand in front of some of the bins at a big box store and just start looking at the differences. Oh, this is what hose thread looks like. Oh, this is what pipe thread looks like. And then if you are going to a physical location where you're buying the stuff, just build a system right there. Just screw stuff into each other and make sure it fits. Anyway, these won't screw together tightly because they're different systems, hose thread here, pipe thread here, but let's just pretend they did. Once I have the capacity to attach to my, what is this thing called? Pressure regulator, pressure reducer, then I'm going to start using this black plastic tubing to run through the length of the garden. This is 5/8 inch plastic tubing, rigid wall plastic tubing. And this is going to be my conduit to wherever I'm going from my main system. From this, the black plastic tubing, when I get to the end, I'll have some kind of an end cap, or you can just bend the end. Sometimes they sell these kind of figure eights that hold things like that. I've also just wired it with some wire. When you create the end, that will put pressure in the system, and you will use a hole punch. You will use a hole punch to literally punch holes. See that prong? You're going to be punching holes in the system. See, I punched one there. I'll punch another one just for fun. Okay, you're going to punch holes in this thing, and then you attach these different implements with your next line. This is called spaghetti tubing, and here's a barb. Let's see where we can focus on that. There's a barb that you're going to put into, literally plug it into the tubing to get your whatever kind of attachment you're going to use. Now this is, I'm struggling here with this. Part of the deal is this tubing is very rigid. It is very inflexible when it's cold. So this stuff is good to do on a warm day. The tubing's going to be a lot more flexible. And or sometimes I bring a thermos full of hot water with me, and I either dip the tubing into it. Okay, if I'm going to put this is a kind of a friction compression fit. where I have to squeeze this tubing into here. I'm going to dip this end in hot water before I do this, and that is going to allow that tubing to flex a lot more. I will just like hold it in a thermos for a minute or two and pull it out. Here I'm going to maybe pour a little hot water on this and get the tubing soft, then I can pop the barb in. So this is not always easy. And again, like maybe it's something you want to practice in your kitchen. You can take some of this tubing, just cut it into short lengths and practice this stuff before you get out into the garden and, you know, start cursing away as things aren't working for you. It's like, why did I follow that in the garden with NBC's advice? This sucks. This is terrible. No, it's a little bit hard, but you'll get it. You'll get it. The last thing I want to say is adding a timer to your drip system. I haven't put a timer in yet. I just showed you how you could use it straight from a hose. But when you add a timer, you're adding an incredible amount of consistency to your irrigation, and that's where you're going to enjoy tremendous success. You can do this thing can free you up to go away for any number of days. You can do every day of the week, every other day, every third day. You can attach rain sensors to these things to shut them off when a certain amount of rain comes. You can do multiple stations. For example, this is a 4-station timer. I can have 4 different areas of my garden I'm watering with different routines. I might be doing 5 minutes a day, 3 times a day for one section, and I might be doing like an hour soak once a week on another section. You can get all these independent schedules going. It's really amazing. These are usually battery powered, these garden versions. I take the batteries out after the season, store this inside, and then put fresh batteries in. I'm just about to install this today, so I'm gonna go get my batteries, get it all programmed up. Again, takes a little while to practice, but with a little time and a little experience, you can get simpler ones. You can get just a straight up 1-station one. You can get some that have a dial that you don't have to really program at all. It just turn the dial to what you want. So go with your level. If you like this kind of stuff and you're handy with it, get something more complicated. If not, get what's simple. This will make your watering a lot more consistent. So this is a big subject, drip irrigation. We didn't cover it all today. There's no way we could in this small segment, but I hope it just gets you thinking about consistency and water reduction, water savings. These are both things that are important to us as gardeners, right? We want our crops to succeed. After all this effort, let's give them what they need on the schedule that they need, and we free ourselves from some work as well. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this segment on drip irrigation. You've been in the garden with NBC. We'll catch you again soon. Happy gardening.
All right. Another great in the garden segment there with Mark Boucher Colbert, NBC, our good friend from Portland, Oregon there. Up on the rooftop of Noble Rot. I mean, how lucky is he to be able to care for a really cool garden like that? I mean, he's got a spectacular view of the whole Portland skyline right up there on that rooftop there. It's just really amazing. I can't wait to get back up there myself and go visit him and check it out again too. But really awesome from him. Talking about irrigation, drip irrigation, man, I got to get on this job. I'm telling you, the one thing that he's absolutely correct about here when he's talking about in that segment is kind of how daunting it can be with all the pieces and parts and, you know, the whole planning out a whole system, especially when you kind of got an erratic gardening space like mine, where it kind of goes into different areas and places and things, where I really got to plan out some different segments of the garden. So I've got to segment them out and do all of that sort of stuff. And I did get it going, and I did have a good setup a couple of years ago put together, and I've got some timers out there and everything. But then through time, also, it's one of those things you've got to also keep up with the maintenance too. This is probably the other thing. I don't know if you mentioned much about that in the thing. As he said, there's so much to talk about, but those kind of lines and all that sort of stuff are going to need some good maintenance. So another good idea too is have some extra line, extra pieces, and extra things there as well too, as things will, either, like he's talking about, blow out maybe at times, or different things will happen. But I've got to go and get mine reset up and just do it. It's going to take some time. It's going to, get everything set back up. But what an advantage it is. Like what he's talking about is that real point of like making sure that we're creating consistency and watering in our garden. This really helps out with a lot of things, especially our tomatoes and, dealing with issues like blossom end rot and all of that, where we really want to get some good consistent watering going on in our garden, and a good drip timed out irrigation system is really truly the way to go when it comes to that. All right, so what a great show so far today. We've got our good friend Gardener Scott coming up here in just 1 minute. Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits. All right. So what's your biggest producer in the garden so far this year? Right now, I'm pulling out tons and tons of things from garlic was our actually and this is just like one per, so it's not really a part of the question, I suppose, but we got a ton of that we just pulled out a week or so ago. To peas. I think I have a variety, and I should have wrote it down which one it was, but so I could say for certain. Maybe I'll remember to bring that to the next show or something. But I was dealing with this pea weevil, and one of my varieties did get hit really good, and then I've noticing a lot from the other variety are actually looking all right. So maybe I've got some good seed that I'll be able to use. So that's kind of something I'm getting a lot of right now, and I'm looking forward to peppers this year. The plants are looking amazing. They didn't get off to a very good start. I showed that a little while ago, but all the plants are just looking great right now and starting to put off lots of flowers, and I'm seeing lots of fruits already starting to form and all of that. So things are going great as far as those go. So what kind of plants and things do you got growing in your garden that are producing really, really well? And real quick here, let's also welcome to the show here. I saw Ladies Kitchen Garden here with us. Awesome. Thank you for joining with us today. And I see our good friend Christopher all the way up from Norway there as well, showing in with us too. Good to see you, Christopher. Thanks for jumping in there and joining with us here in the conversation. Rick says, I'm a water can guy, or hose if no rainwater. Yeah, I'm telling you, and I've talked about this before. I love it too. There's something about spending the time in the garden and getting to just kind of hang out with the garden and water it and stand there with the hose, and it gives you time to look at things and see what kind of things you need to be thinking about, or what kind of things you might need to be replacing, or if you it really does do a good service to actually kind of get out there and do some hand watering. But for the most part, if we're looking for, like what Mark was saying in that segment there too, is we're really looking to get some good consistency, and really want to make sure that our gardens are staying pretty evenly watered, especially during that transition into summer heat, which we're really, really dealing with right now. It's pretty crazy, all of the summer heat that we've got going on. But All right, all right. Guess what? It's time now, finally, because it is the second Sunday of the month, and I look forward to this each and every month. It's really great this year that we get to hang out with him and talk with him all about all of our gardening questions and all of that sort of stuff. So let's catch up with Gardener Scott. All right, Scott. Hey, how are you doing again? Great to see you.
Hey, Nick. I'm doing fine. Good to see you.
Awesome. Excellent. Yeah. Great to have you back here. Thanks for joining with us again today. Lots and lots of stuff going on in the garden this time of year, right?
Yeah, it's exploding. The plants I put in a month ago now are just beautiful. They're doing great. Of course, like many people in the U.S., we just are underneath a heat dome that is bringing excessively high temperatures. I think this week we set 3 record high temperatures. So trying to keep the plants from wilting and dying is a challenge, but it's good. It's great. It feels great to actually be out in the garden again.
Yeah. For us, we're still under the pressure, man. In fact, yesterday I looked at my little weather gauge because I look at it every morning. Where we at, where are things looking, and it said, and this was early in the morning when I looked at it, it said that we were going to dip down into the 90s finally. Yeah.
Nice.
We've been in the hundreds for like well over a week and a half or so, at least 100 or above, and upwards of, 110, a 111. I think we had a 113 or something like that. It's been really intense. So we're like, oh, now it's going to finally dip into the 90s, like 98, 97 or something like that. And it's like, oh, we get to cool off. And then I came back to the weather app a little bit later in the day, and it had them at 101, 102, the same days I was looking at. They switched them, and I'm like, no. Oh, we were so close. But that's the time of year, so that's the same kind of situation for you over there in Colorado as well too, though. So
typically this time of year our highs are 90, high 80s, but this week we've been touching on 100. So we've been 10 to 15 degrees above normal for a long time, but at 7,000 feet elevation,
I was gonna say,
the heat, it may be the same temperature, but the air pressure is different, and it just is hot.
It's so much of a different feeling. Hot is hot when it comes down to it, but it is a different feeling of those same temperatures. And I hear that from people all the time, about whether it's 100 degrees in Florida versus 100 degrees here, 100 degrees in the mountains where you're at, or out in the plains where someone else is gardening from, just depending on where our regions are and all that, we get a different feeling to that heat.
Absolutely. And the locals joke, we talk about, it's hot, but it's a dry heat. And we say that with a chuckle, but it's really true. My son lives in Louisiana, and high humidity there. And they'll have 95 degrees, and it'll be 105 or 108 heat index because of the humidity. I'm so dry, humidity throughout the summer is always less than 20%, that it'll be 95 degrees with a heat index of 95 degrees. So it's a dry heat. It doesn't feel hotter than it is, but it still is hot.
Right. Yes, exactly. And I'm so lucky I don't get so much of that humidity either. I have been over on the East Coast during the summertime when the humidity is just at such a high number. And it is, I tell this story to people all the time. I remember the first time I ever had the experience. I was coming out of an airport. And, the airport's all air conditioned. It's fine. You don't think from the airplane to getting your bags to everything. And then all of a sudden you got to go out that door into the world of where you're at. Right. And I remember I walked out of the sliding doors open, and I walked out, and it felt like walking into like a pillow. Like a pillow. And I just felt it just enveloping all around me. And I took a couple of breaths, and I had to turn around and walk right back in.
Yeah.
because I had to take my breath for a second and actually because I had to think about it. Okay, and I went back out and I was able to, deal with it, whatever. But it was such a surprise. I had to stop for a second, and go, wait a minute, because it's such a different type of
It really is.
atmosphere for sure. Yeah, right on, right on. So again, too, how things growing? We've been kind of following the progress of your garden here as we get you here each and every month to talk about the things that we've got growing on and all of that, and answer some gardening questions here.
Sure.
But how are things growing now? It's July now. We're right now in the summer and all of that. Like you said, it's hot and all of that, but everything's growing pretty good and looking
Yeah.
good out there.
When I was on, I had just finished or was in the process of finishing my planting a little bit later this year. And so I didn't get my tomatoes and peppers and squash seeds in the ground until the second week of June. And so now it's really only been a month that everything's in the ground. But, I love my raised beds. One of the reasons I love my raised beds is because I am in the soil, I get it nice and rich and alive. And my tomatoes right now may be the greenest and strongest I've ever had. And part of that is because I amended the soil all the way back in September and October. And so it's had all of these months to build up those microbial populations in the soil, and they're releasing all the nutrients into the soil. And I don't use fertilizers much at all. And so when I plant into that healthy soil, the plants are amazing. I'm growing dwarf tomatoes for the first time, and they're about 15 to 18 inches tall right now, but they've got flowers, they're starting to fruit,
Mhm.
plus they're strong. And so everything is just doing great. Some melon seeds I planted were a little slow getting started. I think it was the excessive sun and heat that kind of stunted them as they were small seedlings, but it just feels good. I'm going to harvest my garlic probably tomorrow. And then in another
Nice.
week or two, I'm going to put some more seeds in to start my fall garden. So just loving it. It's hard. I was outside for about an hour and a half this morning watering. And, like you're talking about Mark's video and
Yeah.
the watering. I like to get out and hand water everything so that I can see how the plants are doing. I can see if there's any problems developing. And Sundays are a day that I do a deep water on my trees and my fruit bushes. It takes about an hour and a half. And Mala comes out with me. She's lying in the shade, but at about the half hour point, she went back into the house because it was just too hot. And as I was staying out working.
Oh man, and I'm telling you, and this is another thing too, and maybe I'll get your take on this as well. Where our temperatures are just so intense and so hot and so consistent day in and day out. So like, 1 or 2 days, you know what I mean? Plants are going to be okay when we get into those
Yeah.
hundreds like that and whatnot. But one of the things I've actually been talking about is as we were really actually just getting into dealing with this last week is just the idea that if plants are drying out, and I mean they're going to too, there's going to be a point where most plants during hot 1 or 2 days, like I said, are just going to limp. They're just going to have to get through it. They're gonna have to bear through it because you'll notice the soil's wet and everything, and so they've got the roots are wet, all of that. But really what I have found though, actually, even if they are wet and the roots are wet and during at least these times, that I kind of find that my plants are getting a little bit of relief when I go out there and I water midday. And a lot of people are, they talk about, and I've heard this thing for years, is that, when you water midday in the intense sun, it's going to burn your plants and that sort of stuff. I've never found that to be the case. In fact, I've found that my plants are always find some sort of relief. And I actually find maybe it isn't quite as necessary if it's just 1 or 2 days of some of that kind of really high heat. But when I'm dealing with a week or so, I really do have to kind of get out there midday. And I will say my cat loves to get out and hang out with me too, just like your dog does and all of that. And just, it's great to have them there with us. But during the hot heat like this, he doesn't know what to do. And I can't get him inside where the AC is because he's too afraid of the noise.
Oh, no.
That poor cat, man.
But
right
I
about
agree
the
with you.
watering.
I totally agree with you. In fact, this week, since it's been so hot, I have been doing afternoon watering. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
biggest issue, I have hoses that run from my faucet out to my garden, long hoses. And so when they're sitting out in the sun in that high heat, the water inside that hose gets hot. I did a video a few years ago where I actually measured the temperature in the hose, and it's hot enough to scald your skin. So you don't want to directly spray that
Yes,
onto the
that's a good
plants.
warning.
And
Yep.
so what I'll do is I'll go out midday and I'll start watering the edges of beds where there aren't any plants actively growing to wet the bed, get that soil moist while the water cools. And then when it gets down to a manageable temperature, that's when I go into the plants. And I'm not doing overhead watering. I'm still watering at the roots. I'm still watering the soil, but the evaporation happens so quickly in that heat, and especially for young plants that have roots close to the surface, that afternoon watering may make
Mhm.
the difference between life and
Exactly.
death, because
Yep.
those young roots are going to die if they get dry. So you need to keep the soil moist, and sometimes an afternoon watering is necessary. So I've been doing at least 2 times a day for a few weeks now, because the plants are young and because it's so
Mhm.
hot.
And let's just I mean, what do you think the idea of, say, oversaturation? It's kind of hard to oversaturate in that type of heat, right? I mean, it's just water's evaporating so fast.
Yeah, a lot of it has to deal with your soil composition. So,
Yeah.
if you're gardening in the ground and you have a clay soil and you oversaturate trying to fight off the heat, that may not be good, because it could be the clay soil is going to hold on to that water and you'll end up drowning your roots. The top half inch might dry out, but the soil below that is going to potentially
Yeah.
saturate to the point that it's too much. But for a well draining soil, for soil with a lot of organic matter in it,
Yeah.
yeah, I take that approach on days when maybe I won't be here in the afternoon to water. I'll oversaturate in the morning so that it drains in that organic matter, like the little sponges can soak up that water,
Mhm.
so that when it does get hot, the soil moisture is moderated
Yeah.
by the soil composition that I have.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Let's see here. I'll just put this back up here real quick. English Ladies Kitchen Garden says it's flipping freezing up here in the
Yeah,
Northeast. I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
she doesn't understand what we're dealing with over here. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's crazy. I correspond with Eli and Kate from Scotland, and
yes.
it's been miserable for
Uh,
Northern England and Scotland for weeks. It's really not summer. It is staying cold and drizzly and just not warming up to be the summer. And then here we are talking about how excessively hot it is. But it's the other extreme, because
yeah.
I haven't had a drop of rain
Hmm.
in at least 3 weeks, maybe a month. There's a
Yeah.
possibility we might get a little bit of rain on one day this week, but it's like a 40% chance. So it probably isn't going to happen. And so that opposite is true too. The cold and the wet is just miserable to be a gardener out there, but the dry and the heat, essentially makes it difficult to get out there and get everything done that we want to get done as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's see here. I want to check in. I think we saw a couple of questions come in just already a little bit ago. All right, let's see. Actually, a good question. Actually, kind of talking about rain and all of that. So, I mean, it's probably a good idea if the rain stops coming for a while, is that you take advantage of it when it does come around. And
Oh,
Serena
sure.
was asking a little bit about how high do rain barrels have to be off the ground in order to have good water pressure for hooking up a hose to water the garden?
So if you're just going to
Good question.
put on a soaker hose, or just let the water drain out, it really doesn't need to be elevated much at all. Put it on some bricks, maybe some concrete blocks that are 8 inches off the ground. If you need pressure, if you actually want to water the garden with a water wand and have some
Mhm.
pressure behind it, you're going to have to elevate it probably at least 10 or 12 feet off the ground
Get it
to
up
get
there,
that kind
yeah.
of pressure. So I think most people that have rain barrels just do the seepage. They just put a hose and let it just run out in the garden. Because as soon as if you've got a water barrel that's only elevated a foot or two off the ground, and you're trying to water and you're holding the water wand at 3 feet off the ground, you're effectively eliminating any pressure that you might have built up in the system. So there's a little bit of pressure when it's lower like that. But that's why, apartment buildings all over the world put their water tanks on top of the building, because the air pressure and the gravity make a big difference the higher up you can get it.
Okay, let's see here. Right on time. Okay, so English Lady's Kitchen Garden was telling us about they're really dealing with some cold weather right now, and is asking, and I always get the pronunciation of this, and aubergine recover from the cold in time to give me a harvest?
Yeah, very likely.
And maybe you could talk about what aubergine is for those who might not know as well.
And so I get them mixed up too, but I believe the aubergine is what we would call a zucchini.
Yeah,
and, it's a type of squash. Right? And so the nice thing about those plants is they tend to be quite resilient, and the cold, and especially really wet conditions over a long period of time, can stunt them, but they're ready to send out new growth. And so I had this issue a couple years ago during the beginning of summer, when I started seeds at a normal time, and then we just had a really cold, wet June, and the plants just didn't progress as they normally would. But as soon as everything started to dry out, as soon as everything started to warm up, that new growth was normal size and put out flowers and put out fruit. And so a lot of it depends on how much time your season really has. I'm guessing you've got at least another 6 weeks, and that should be more than enough time for squashes of all types to start developing and give you the harvest that you're hoping for.
Excellent. Right on. Let's see.
Assuming it warms up soon.
Yeah, assuming it does warm up soon, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Actually, Serena's got another question for us here. Great. Is there a trick to speeding up the growth of cucumber vines? Mine is only a couple of inches out of the ground after a month, and I've been keeping it watered. She's got a slow grower there, it looks like, Scott.
Yeah. There's not a lot you can do. That's the problem I'm having with my melons, is they're just a few inches after a month. My cucumbers after a month are about 6 inches tall, so they're actually doing pretty well. Consistent moisture is a big part of it. And so talking about the heat in particular, it is normal for plants to wilt, and it is normal for plants to slow down their transpiration, the movement of water through the plant, and their growth during the heat of the day. And so if you have a dry soil, then it's actually going to cause more problem with the plant. So if there's plenty of moisture in the soil, the plant can do a normal amount of wilting, the transpiration will slow. But if the soil is dry, when it wilts, it's not going to recover. And so it really slows down the growth problem or process. And so for really small plants that are already looking like they're slow, you've got to keep the soil moist all the time during the heat of the day, because when they start that process when they are slowing their midday growth and transpiration, if there isn't moisture in the soil to recover once the temperatures start cooling again, it's really going to set them back even a longer time. And then shade cloth. I've got shade cloth over a number of my beds to also cool it down so that transpiration and wilting process is lessened, and they can put more of their energy into growing. If their energy is going into just protecting the plant because of the stress that it's encountering, it's not going to be growing. So you really need to try to reduce the stress as much as possible.
All right. It's time for us to get corrected here, Scott. It's what we call eggplant. Zucchinis are
Okay, I thought you had them
courgettes.
mixed
See,
up.
and those
Yeah,
are the two, and that was the
yeah,
other one. And I know we both fell for the same one.
yeah. But the answer is the same for eggplants,
Mm.
and all fruiting vining plants. The answer is basically the same. As long as you have a variety that will produce harvest in the remaining time you have left, it should be fine. And so when I grow courgettes, eggplants, I choose varieties that are like 70-day varieties, and my
Mm-hmm.
season's only 120 days long, so that if I have a slow start to the season, they
Yeah.
still have enough time to recover if something happens to them.
Yeah. Yeah. My slow start with the eggplants this year was that I killed off like 2 sets of seeds somehow. I don't know what it was or what I did wrong. I'm sure it was some error I made for sure. I don't know,
Yeah.
because I can't imagine all those seeds being that defunct, and not able to grow. So something went wrong there. So it took me a while before I was finally able to get some good eggplant starts going. But again, too, this is kind of one of the things that I find, especially too, which could also be the case with some things. And I find it with some varieties of cucumber as well. But really what I see is watermelon acts like this for me all the time.
Sure.
Peppers are very much like this as well too. They just kind of grow and they hit a certain point, and then they just kind of sit there and they just don't
Yeah.
do anything for a little while. And then you're like, come on, what's going on? Why are you not doing anything? And then you go off and do something for a minute or two, and next thing you know, boom, they're just starting, they take off. And that's kind of what happens with some plants too, is they just kind of do that. They get to a point, and maybe what they're doing is they're just kind of focusing on the root system for a little bit or something,
Yeah, I think that's a
or
big part of
right.
it. We don't think enough about the quality of our soil and what's happening with the roots. And so, for a plant to grow and put on new leaves and put on new vines and put on the flowers and put on the fruit, the roots have to be able to supply the nutrition for that to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Yeah, I guess it comes back to what you were saying. Exactly.
yeah, I don't know the specific mechanism, but basically in the little plant's brain, not that plants really have brains, but it's saying, um, I need to put out more roots before I
Yeah.
put on more leaves. And
Yeah.
so it's not going to grow until it has the root system to support it.
And that's pretty
And
much probably the case of exactly what's going on. I just
yeah,
find there are some things, especially peppers, which I've grown for
I see it with
every
peppers
year for
too.
years. It's just they always just kind of seem to freeze for a little bit. They
Yeah,
just
yeah,
kind of
right
go,
about the
this
time.
nice little small size. And then
Exactly. They're formed, and about the time you want them to grow bigger and then start to change color,
yeah.
that's the time it seems to be a plateau. And so
Yeah.
it takes a lot of energy for a plant to develop a fruit. There's the
Yeah.
seeds that are in part of it. There's a lot of moisture that the fruits have. And so it makes sense that the plant is just waiting until it has a more established root system. And then that little plant brain says, okay, the roots are big enough now, and then bam, all that energy that was going into the roots are now going into the fruit. And I think that's why, like you said, often it feels like it's overnight that suddenly everything changes. And I think that's a big part of it, is the plant finally can divert some of that root energy into fruit energy.
Yeah, exactly. Just seems to be the case, and sometimes that is, and just a little patience, and like you say, keep them watered, and eventually, hopefully, they'll just get going for you
Yeah.
eventually. And I've always found plants surprise me. I get worried about some all the time, and then by the end of the year, I'm like, why was I even worried about that?
Yeah.
Right on, right on. Let's see here. I know I saw another question in here. Let's see here. Oh, back to a good rain question here from Dusty Flats asking, will too much rain make tomatoes grow weak, slow, or short?
Yeah, possibly. I was
Yeah.
talking about how the feeder roots, the really small roots that are on the plants, can dry out and die. They can also drown and die. And so that's why you really want a consistent moisture where it's not too wet and not too dry for the root development, because Absolutely. If it's too much rain and that water gets saturated, roots need oxygen. And if there's no oxygen, because the little pore space, those little pockets of empty space in the soil that usually holds oxygen, if the
Yeah.
soil's saturated, those little pores are filled with water instead
Yeah.
of air. And so now the roots drown and die. The
Yep.
plant overall may not die, but a lot of the roots will die. And so exactly what I was just talking about, the plant needs the energy from the roots to support the growth of the plant. And so if you're killing off those roots with too much water or too little water, then
Yep.
that's going to affect how the plant grows. And it could be weak, and it could be slow
Mhm.
growth, and it could not reach the height that you're expecting. Absolutely, that could happen.
Yeah, yeah, and also, being a victim of what every new gardener kind of gets crazy about when they see it is that blossom end rot too.
Yeah,
This is one of those
absolutely.
things I've been learning more and more about, studying from different university extensions as I've been reading different people who've been studying this more, is that it
Yeah.
really does come down to that watering consistency, oversaturation, or too dry, because
Exactly.
what you're really causing is root death.
Yep.
And root death then causes basically, and I don't know if I have this part of it exactly right, but it causes basically a certain sense of defensiveness that the plant takes on, or a lockout where it's not really uptaking the nutrients like it would normally. So
Yeah.
therefore, that calcium that is usually the cause, or people talk about being the cause of blossom end rot, is then just the fact that the calcium's there, it's just not doing anything with it at the time of the blossoms trying to form fruits
Exactly.
because of what's going on. And then that's why you see it in those fruits. Then an adjustment's made as we transition through the season, things get more consistent, and then your remaining fruits probably are going to be fine.
Yeah. I think it was Dr. Elaine Ingham who is the one you may have seen information about the soil food web.
Yes.
But I think she was the one I had seen a lecture she gave where she said every soil on the planet has enough calcium in it.
Yeah.
And blossom end rot is caused by a calcium deficiency. And so a lot of people think they can just bury eggshells and pour milk
Hmm.
on it and it's going to fix the problem. But that's not the problem. It's exactly what you identified. The roots are not able to uptake the calcium that is in the soil
Yeah. Yep.
because the roots have been damaged from too much or too
Too
little
little.
water. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
that's why if you've got blossom end rot, there's a 99% possibility that it's because the plant can't take up that calcium that's already in the soil for some
Hmm.
reason. Usually it's a watering issue, but it comes back to the roots are really the main cause.
Yeah, yeah, and it can really, and it'll happen to anybody and almost everybody, because one of the other
Yeah,
real issues really just comes down to the fact that, and especially is what we were talking about already too, is we're seeing these record-breaking temperatures. I've broken records here too over this last
yeah,
week as well, is that we're going through these just really extreme transitions. So your garden's going through, so you might be used to like, okay, well, I water this much or do this
yes,
much, or you might have timers set to this much drip or this and
exactly.
that. And then so that whole balance just gets kind of tipped because we're in such an extreme transition. And so it can happen to almost anybody. And that's why you see a lot of it over all around social media this time of year, is because that's exactly what I think people are facing, is that just it's hard to kind of find that consistency that they need. And I had a guest on, Scott, just a few weeks back ago, and I asked him, and I ask people all the time about what are your favorite things to grow in the garden, right? And a lot of the times, a lot of us talk about tomatoes, peppers,
Mhm.
those first things that we get to grow are really great. But I always ask too, what's your least favorite thing to grow? And hers was tomatoes. And one of the reasons why she said tomatoes is because they're the divas of the garden. So when it comes down to it, and I've talked about this, and I think it's really kind of funny, is that tomatoes are really resilient young plants.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
they want to grow. The problem that we find is that when it comes to fruiting and when it comes to that, that's when we start seeing all of these issues, all of these things that start to come up. And that's what kind of what she was talking about, is that they seem to have all of these issues when they get, when they get older.
But they're manageable, and a lot of those
Yeah,
issues they
that's
have are
true.
caused by us.
Hmm.
I think you raised a very important point. The the tendency for many gardeners, especially busy gardeners that have a job, and so they do drip irrigation, like Mark was talking about. They set up timers, and
Yeah.
they do all of that at the beginning of the season. So when they put the plants in the ground, they set up their drip system, they set up their timers, and then they don't adjust it. Like you were saying, there are transitional periods throughout the growing season. And
Hmm.
so the amount of time you set for your timer and your irrigation system when you first plant in May is not going to be enough in the middle of July. And so people think, I've had that same type of question, and people wondering, why are my tomatoes getting blossom end rot? I've got a drip system and it irrigates every day, but I still have blossom end rot. And then, of course, the next question is, well, how much are they watering? And it might only be 10 minutes a day, which was enough when the plants were little and the
Hmm.
weather was cooler, but that's not enough when the plants are bigger and the weather is hotter. So we
Yeah.
cause a lot of those problems, even though we think we may have put some safeguards in place.
Exactly. We could try our best, and that's just when it comes down with gardening, is that it's there's a lot of these just ins and outs of those things. A lot of them are what we have to care for and manage and put, and create these little control systems, I
Yep.
suppose. Um, uh, um, but that's the fun of gardening, though, too, in a sense, is just, kind of learning things and going through some of this stuff and figuring those things out so that you can mitigate those sort of things a little bit better,
Absolutely.
and just kind of tune those sort of stuff in. And but also at the same time, I do have to put the caveat that, with weather changes and such extremes like this, it becomes hard for even a seasoned gardener like yourself, Scott. We're learning as we go every
Oh
single
yeah.
year, even because it's just, Mother Nature will throw things out and
Yeah.
challenges at us that
And
that
things
all of us got
happen.
to figure out.
I had some blossom end rot last
Mm.
year, and it was primarily because I took a trip for a few days, and I had someone I knew water the garden, and they obviously didn't water enough. And when I came back, I didn't recognize that it hadn't been watered as deeply as I had done. So I continued to do my normal watering practices, and deeper in the soil was just too
Mhm.
dry for the tomatoes, and I got blossom end rot. And it wasn't until I got blossom end rot that I then dug into the soil to figure out that at some
Mm.
point in the previous couple of weeks, it had dried down. The soil had dried out at like 6 or 8
Yeah.
inches deep, which was a critical point for where the tomato roots are.
Yeah. Let's see here. Actually, here's something I wanted. Oh, it was a little comment, but I think we can turn it into something here. Dusty Flats was mentioning something about seeing a video about why they had blossom end rot and the leaves were curling and lawn burned. I'm not sure, but I know they used enough calcium. So
Yeah.
yeah, again, back to the point is that most soils have available calcium. It isn't usually an issue, but leaf curling on your
Yeah.
tomatoes too.
I just noticed a little bit on my tomatoes this morning, but I've got some young apple trees with some serious leaf curl. And
Yes, I do too. My apple trees, heat,
yeah, and it's heat. Exactly. Leaf curl is a natural response and
just
defense mechanism for
kind of
when it
pulling
gets too
itself
hot.
in. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's trying to
reserve.
reserve that water vapor through the
Yeah.
transpiration and hold it closer to the leaf. And so that's an indication, and this may be what Dusty's talking about, that if you see leaf
An
curl on your
indication.
tomatoes, it could be an indication that there's not enough moisture in the soil and water. However,
Mhm.
leaf curling can be a response to too much water. And so that's the
These darn
problem.
plants, God darn
I
it. What
know.
are they doing to us?
When it's hot and windy and we know we're not watering enough and we see leaf curl, it's easy to say,
Mhm.
oh, the plant's just trying to survive because it's so hot. You really do need to to physically check your soil. You need to just dig a little hole.
Yeah.
And I've done this on 3 of the last 4 days in my tomato beds in particular. I stuck my finger in the beds to see if the soil is moist, because I'm using soaker hoses on my tomato beds, and the soaker hoses are covered with mulch. So I really can't
Mhm.
see the soil. The plants look like they're doing great, but there's no no definite way for me to tell if the soaker hose is supplying enough water
Mhm.
unless I stick my finger in the soil to find out. And so leaf curl, yeah, it's probably too hot, but stick your finger in the soil to see if maybe it's because the soil is saturated.
Yes, and yeah, that's definitely probably your first indicator that somewhere, somehow, something is too dry. First and foremost is what I
Yeah,
would say. Your
usually.
second one is if you really are a waterer and you have a system and it's just, then again, I think then you should probably look at, maybe are you doing a little too much, and look at saturation at that point in time too as well.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, I use containers. So I've got this leaf curl on my apple trees. They're out in the back patio there, but they're in some nice container pots, regular pots. They got the, the regular nursery pots. So they got the holes
Mhm.
around the side edge of the bottom there and all of that. What do you think of, like, maybe I go and get like, and this was kind of one of my ideas, because I was wondering if I'm not, if like the center, or if that pot is just so dry, it's just not taking up any water that I'm
Yeah.
trying to water it with. So it looks like it's wet on top to me, and I just water the heck out of it and water it, and all it's doing is just dripping down the side of it. So what do you think of, like, maybe getting, like, I was thinking maybe getting like a container, or go buy like a new one of those like oil pans or something, and just go and set it in like some water
Oh
to let
yeah.
it wick up instead of trying to drench it.
Oh
Let it
yeah.
wick it up.
That's one of those recovery techniques for houseplants that have gotten too dry.
Yep.
Is you
Yep.
you take the pot that the houseplant is in, and put it into a big pot of water, put it into the sink so that it can soak up all the water. Because a lot of the soils we use in our containers, if they dry out, they become hydrophobic, which
Mhm.
means they repel water. And
Yep.
so you water and water and water. And if it dried out, it's going to take a lot of water for it to get to the point that it can hold water. And soaking it in something exactly as you say, so that you're watering it from the top and it's also wicking up moisture from the bottom. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. And of course, especially for all of us who do container gardens, it's I have tons of different types of containers and all of that. Watering really is, especially this time of year, probably the most important thing, because
Oh
of
yeah.
kind of what we're talking about here. Is it creates hydrophobia in your soil.
Yep.
Your soil then pushes water away. It doesn't want to
Yep.
pull it in at that point in time, and that's a really detrimental situation for any of your plants if it gets to that level. So having some sort of way of doing that and allowing water to, like, a pan of it, is always your best. And I was looking around there as you're saying that, because I know I've got a bowl in here somewhere, which is my emergency bowl for some of my smaller
Yeah.
potted plants that I might overlook every now and then. And I've got to do that, and I got to let them soak up. But it is also one of the reasons why, too, and one of the most popular videos on my channel is our videos on our earth buckets, our
Oh,
water
okay.
wicking buckets. So if you
Yeah.
are container gardening, I seriously recommend these. I mean, they're 5 gallons worth of good root space. I can grow most everything except for big giant tomatoes and stuff like that. But I can grow
Nice.
most things in these things. I've grown tons of stuff. I really recommend them. And they do kind of give us a relief from having to worry about that sort of thing for a bit. As long as we're making sure that reservoir is nice and full during the hottest parts of the summer and that sort of thing. But it can happen in just a short period of time, that a
Yep.
whole container could dry out. And even, I'll also mention this too, is I have these elevated raised beds that are on my back patio too. So those are containers as well. I might call them raised beds, and they're big. They're 2 foot by 4 foot,
Oh, sure.
big type
That's
of
a raised bed.
elevated beds, but they're still big containers. The same sort of situation
Mhm.
applies, that they're going to dry up real fast, probably in a snap on a hot 100 and some
Absolutely.
degree day, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
the I water most of my containers twice a day. The only containers I don't water more often are the ones that are actually in the garden next to bigger plants, and those bigger plants shade them. And they're actually, they might be an inch or two buried in the soil. And so that also helps moderate some of that lower soil moisture. And
Mhm.
so, except for those pots that are actively in the garden next to other raised beds, uh, all the containers on my patio and deck, I'm watering every single day and sometimes twice a day.
Yeah, yeah. Important too is just really, and that's when, it's the hottest part of the day and you just want to be hiding out in the AC and all that.
Yeah,
It's the hottest part of the day for them out there too. So that's probably the best time to take that little
good point.
stroll around real quick and take a look, because that's going to be the danger time for them. So you want to kind of catch it at that point if you can, for sure. So nice water in the morning, but get out there in the afternoon just for a check. Who knows, you might have to get it done then too, because it just, like I said, it's container gardening. We just don't want our plants to dry out.
Yeah.
Rick actually dropped this question real quick too, and I think he's talking about our wicking buckets I was just mentioning. Is it too small for fruit trees? And I'd say, yeah, 5 gallons probably isn't really
Well,
the good size for.
he might be asking, because I had that temporary thought that if the container you've got for your fruit tree, if you are able to pick it up and
Oh,
put it inside another container to water it, is that fruit tree container big enough? So
right, right, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know how big a pot you're talking
Mine,
about for your
yeah,
fruit
it's a
tree.
pretty good size one. I would
Okay.
say it's probably, I'd almost say 10 gallons or so more.
Okay.
But still, I think I could muscle it if I needed to get it up.
And you can always get
It's
someone to help
up
you out.
on it's actually kind of up on, this kind of pedestal of, like, milk crates that I've got. So it's up there to kinda get the higher sun from a fence I've got, so I've got it
Oh, okay.
elevated to catch light. So it's kind of up there a little bit to where I could grab the pot, maybe lift it up, put it up in something. So I was kinda thinking that's what I really need to do, because 'cause I'm
And
thinking
give it a
that
try.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely the fact that I'm not able to, and it's dry in there no matter how much I'm watering it, it's not soaking it up. So that's what I gotta do. But again, that's why I was thinking like a bigger type of container or something, was because it is a bigger container it's in, and that's kind of been the issue, is like, 'cause I was like, "Oh, I need to get those wicking somehow," but it's a big container. I'm gonna have to find something that I
Yeah.
gotta put it in, like, not quite big enough where I'm gonna need a kiddie pool or anything, but I was thinking like maybe one of those good size oil pans might work or
Oh, there you
something.
go. Yeah. Something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Deep
yeah.
enough to
So that's
actually
probably
have some water pool up for a while.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely, exactly, and I think that's what that's the case. If you have that ability to do that with any of your containers, if they do seem like they're dried out, that's probably the best way of going, if they got the holes on the bottom like that. Let them
Yeah.
soak up that water. Right on, right on. One of the other things, here, let's actually, actually, before I do that, let me check here too. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. There was one other question, and I'm not sure if I've heard of this before. Have you heard of, what is it,
Yeah.
kaolin clay?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
haven't used it. I've used diatomaceous earth in the past
right.
for pest control. I've seen a lot. There's in recent months more and more videos that people are posting talking about using the clay, very fine powder that you sprinkle on the plant to try to deal with pest issues. I honestly don't have many pest issues. One
Right.
of the things I do, and in the first couple years that I have a garden, there might be some pests, but I just saw a wasp. I tried to take a picture of it. It was about 2 inches long. I
Oh,
was in my
wow.
greenhouse. It came in. It was scary looking, but it's one of those. And I want to take a picture so I
Just
could identify it in
double
particular.
segmented,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
just
it was
like,
huge.
oh,
But I've
those
got
things are.
predators like that in my garden. I'm not worried about the
Mhm.
wasps.
Oh, I love
I'm
them.
not worried about, the predatory insects, because they're dealing with all the pests I have in my garden. So
Yeah.
I've used some of those things in the past, but my control now is just having flowers in the garden, having grasses in the flower, having herbs, or having the grasses and the flowers and the herbs in the garden, and all of those are going to attract different beneficial insects and really reduce the pest problem. And then the other issue I have, and the reason I haven't used the clay in particular and why I stopped using diatomaceous earth, is because at the time of year that you really should be using it, when the insects are small and emerging and just starting to eat the plants, here in Colorado, that's our thunderstorm season. And so
Mm.
when you apply something like that to your plant and you water the plant or it rains, all of that's going to be washed off. And so you need to reapply again. And I'm a relatively lazy gardener and I don't want to have to reapply a pest control
Mhm.
every single day because we're having thunderstorms every single day. So some of the stuff I've seen shows that it works, but I haven't done it for those
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah, I'm really resilient to just using really, and I should, and just to try and test things out. And I thought about, but I think there's so many people who do a lot of good stuff out there with that sort of stuff. I'm really just trying to create as much of a natural kind of garden that I
Yeah,
possibly can without really doing that, and really kind of like you said, allowing for the natural process to do certain things. And you mentioned wasps. One of the things that, and they are highly beneficial to a lot of these sort of
absolutely.
things. I mean, they're out there. They're going to go get those little caterpillars, those little things and stuff. That's what they're out there praying. So finding ways to even encourage them to get into your garden is a good thing. And
Yeah.
this year, and I've had from years before, but this year I'm really noticing, because I've got cool little water fountains, like little
Nice.
waterfall fountains, and I've got also like a little it's like a little bird water bath, but I put like little marbles and stuff in there too, so that they
Mhm.
come and land on and get some water. But I'm attracting them to the garden with this water because it's so hot. They're just out
Oh,
searching
yeah.
for water. I've got tons of like yellow jackets and other
Yes,
wasps and all sorts of stuff flying around everywhere, just getting a drink of water, and then they're cruising around my garden trying to maybe find some food after the drink or so. and
absolutely.
and so I'm not seeing as much of a pest issue on some of that stuff, because that we're attracting that stuff
Yeah.
into our garden, and that's a
Yeah,
great
I
way. I think it's a
agree.
great suggestion. Get some water ways, because those bugs out there need to drink too, and they're out searching for a drink on hot days. So that's a great idea as well.
Yeah, grow the greatest variety of plants you can, all different types. Definitely put the water in. And you're right. I've noticed every day in my water feature the wasps drinking water out of
Hmm.
that. And I've even noticed in my hummingbird feeder, the bees have always done it, but this year the wasps are doing it a
They're
little
getting
bit
in on
more.
it too, huh?
So that absolutely the way to do it. There's an article in our local newspaper today talking about the grasshoppers here in Colorado, in my part of Colorado, that this is the
Yeah.
worst year for grasshoppers
Oh, I've
in a
been
couple
seeing them too.
decades.
I've got little tiny ones. I've
Well,
never noticed these
and
ones
that's how
before.
they start off. So the nymphs, the babies, it's kind of a
So I guess it's
gradual
probably what they are, but I'm
metamorphosis.
seeing a ton of them right now.
Yeah, they start small and then they'll metamorphosize into a slightly bigger size, and then they ultimately get into the big size.
I've been
But
noticing them.
with all these problems that are in the newspaper at last month at my garden club meeting, a couple of people were talking about how bad the grasshoppers were. I saw my first full size adult grasshopper today.
Oh, did you? Your first
And I
one?
think that's because I've got all this biodiversity. I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
bird houses that this week, one of the
Hmm.
baby birds flew away after having been in it for a few weeks. So I've got birds that are eating the insects, the insect pests like grasshoppers. I've got the
Yeah.
wasps. And maybe more importantly, I mentioned at the beginning that I was late putting my plants in. Well, many insects are very plant specific. They're only going to eat a particular type of plant, and most of the species of grasshopper are that way as well. They will only
Yeah.
eat certain types of plants. And so when they emerge and are those little nymphs and starting to go around the garden trying to find food, if
Mhm.
those plants aren't growing yet, then
Yeah.
they're going to either die off or go someplace else. And I think, at least for me this year, that was a big factor in why I don't have
Oh,
virtually
just
any
just
grasshoppers,
the late start helped you out big time,
because
huh?
when they were babies, there was nothing to eat.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you know anything about what their eating looks like? This is something I was wondering because I was actually out there looking. Do they eat from like a middle of the leaf or like the
Yeah,
edge of the leaf?
holes are very common. They'll perch on the leaf and then they'll kind of go down and chew a little hole. They're not like a caterpillar that starts from the outside and munches their way in. They just kind of start eating wherever it is they land. And when, if there's a swarm of them, some are eating the outside, some are eating the inside, some are eating the stems. The whole part of the plant is good for them. But generally, that's one way to tell is holes in the leaves, kind of an irregular size holes. It's not like a perfect
Right.
circle, and they're not all the same size. It's irregular holes on the
Because
leaves.
I'm pretty sure that's what's like trying to take out my potatoes right now, and
Sure.
and for me, and here comes my situation. I love it, and I love the idea. That is the one thing I do not make any real effort to attract to my garden spaces are birds. As much as I would love to do that, and I mean I would love to, and it isn't just my cat. I love my cat. My neighbor's got cats. So I've got alley cats that'll run through if I don't own cats. You know what I mean? So in any sort of situation like that, I've wanted, like, I've seen some really cool
Yeah.
like bird things and stuff, and I think about it all the time. And for the most part, I do have a couple of like bird things I have like really kind of high up. So I have some that they can
That's
fly,
good.
like I have a hummingbird thing, that sort of stuff, because if they're high up, I actually, oh, what I'm trying to think of what it was, a sage, pineapple sage.
Okay. Nice plant.
Pineapple sage I grew in my herb garden. I got one from a place I went to go visit Wendy Fan down in Los Angeles. We were at this plant sale and I picked up this pineapple sage. It was really cool. And I brought it here and I planted it in my herb garden and it grew really big, beautiful bush and everything. I was like, oh, this is just amazing. And then it puts out its flowers. And pineapple sage has little trumpet flowers. And guess what loves little trumpets?
Little
Hummingbirds.
Yeah.
And it's right low to the ground, and so I've got all these little hummingbirds flying all over this pineapple sage. And when I noticed that, I had to rip that sucker out real quick. I put
Because
it
of
in
the
a
cat.
container and tried to keep it alive and all of that and everything, but didn't work out too well. It was the wrong time of year, and I just yeah, but I had to get rid of it because it was just like, I can't take the risk. I can't let the cats do that.
Well, there are trade-offs. Garden dog Mala likes to chase the birds, and occasionally
Yeah.
she'll catch one.
Yeah.
And
It is an unfortunate fact of nature, though, right?
exactly. That's all part of the balance. I hate to see it. She had a mouse last week, a
Yep.
mouse the week before, and a bird the week before that, and a bird the week before that. So she's usually getting
Yeah.
at least one thing a week in her hunting. But that's part of nature. And then I noticed today when I was watering, a couple days ago, I noticed one of my currant bushes was very close to uh, harvesting,
Mm.
and I tasted one, and it was good, but not quite there. And I went out to water everything today, and I noticed that bush was stripped of all the currants. Now,
Oh,
the
yeah,
birds ate it, but I'm okay with that. One of the reasons I've got
it's true.
4, 8, 10. I think I've got 12 currant bushes in my backyard, and I've got 2 in my front yard. And one of the reasons I grow berry bushes is for the birds. That's one of those things that protects them, from cats. They can get inside the bush, and it provides the food for them as well. So, uh, I'm willing to sacrifice a bird or two from my dog, and I'm also willing to sacrifice fruit from my plants because I
Mhm.
think it's a healthy garden that has the birds in it, and they
Yeah.
definitely, depending on the bird, will take care of some of the garden pests.
Yeah, yeah, there is definitely trade-offs we gotta look at and think about in certain things, and there are, like I said, there are some birds who come in and grab and get onto some of my stuff, my blueberries and things like that
Yeah,
too, that I'm perfect like, "Okay, George, get to work. Get over there. This is where you need to be watching out for."
that's
Real
right.
quick, I'm gonna kinda go back to something just real quick because, Patrice, and I wanna say hi to Patrice too. It's so great to see you. It's been such a long time. I haven't seen your name, but Patrice, it's so awesome. Got to meet Patrice a couple of times. In fact, we did a video years together.
Oh, nice.
Together at her garden, at her place, and all of that too, which was really awesome. But she's like talking about that, putting a tray in about the tree, with that to let it soak up and all of that too. Is she's saying, and I wanted to kind of mention this because this was a good point, is that it also helps keep nutrients from washing out of the tree. Because then here's another thing to think about too, because you also mentioned that when we were talking about that clay stuff and all that too, is when we're putting things on, they wash away, we've got to reapply, that sort of thing. But that sort of thing kind of comes in the same case when it comes to nutrients as well too, because we're washing nutrients, and I've mentioned this before when I talk about container gardening a lot, is that you kind of have to fertilize just a little bit more. You have to kind of feed just a little bit more in a container because of those issues. If you are watering from the top, you're kind of washing some nutrients, right?
Yeah, especially nitrogen. So there are a number of nutrients that will actually bind to the soil, and you can get all into the cations and how the physics work. But nitrogen primarily washes right through soil. It doesn't bind to soil particles at all. And whereas the phosphorus and the potassium, the big three NPK, they'll tend to stay in the soil. The nitrogen leaches right out. And that holds true in a raised bed, holds true especially in containers, that if you're watering enough that the water is soaking down to the bottom, the nitrogen is soaking down to the bottom as well. And so, like I said, I don't fertilize much, but if I notice in the containers that the plants are beginning to show some signs of nitrogen deficiency, I will add fertilizer to my containers for that reason.
Yeah, great idea to do that. And again too, it does, and I think that's what Patrice mentioned there too, is just a great idea as well too, is if you have the ability to just put dishes and trays underneath of those ones that really could use it, and you just water them that way consistently, you might be able to hold back a little bit because you're not washing it out. So really, if you are an overhead waterer, and enjoy doing that, that's just something you really kind of want to think about, is kind of increasing that to make sure that you are getting some of those nutrients back in there that are real quick question too, before I move on to one last thing I want to talk with you about. Do corn ears lag behind tassels? We have a great crop growing for once, but are nervous.
If the conditions are right, and if the plant is not stressed, then it's all going to work out fine. You're going to have the ears develop, and right about the time those little hairs start peeking out, then you're going to have the tassels start, and then the pollen's going to transfer in the wind. Corn is a wind pollinated plant. I'm pretty sure Dusty Flats knows that, but for everybody, corn is not pollinated by insects. So you need to have the right timing for the pollen that's at the top of the corn plant to then be blown onto the ears of corn,
the silks off the ears,
and the silk, those little hairs, the silk is what catches the pollen, and each of those little silks is attached to a kernel of corn. And so if you harvest your corn and there's gaps in the kernels, that just meant it wasn't complete pollination. And so it works. Nature is designed the corn plant to have the right timing so that you're able to harvest the corn and it is pollinated. But it's possible, especially like here in Colorado this last week with our heat, we had extremely windy days. And if that wind of 40 miles an hour is hitting at the wrong time, the pollen is being blown into your neighbor's yard and it's not pollinating the corn. Or if the temperature is too high, pollen can actually be killed by heat. And so the corn plant might have the pollen, but when we're talking these days over 100 degrees, that's hot enough to kill the pollen of most plants that are using,
especially on a prolonged period of time, for sure.
So there's a possibility of lagging because of the weather. and
Mhm.
how the plant is responding to the weather, but I wouldn't worry too much about it, especially if you've already got the plants in the ground. There's not a
Yeah.
lot you can do about it other than keep your fingers crossed and hope that the conditions are right. And almost all the time, if you have corn plants, you're going to be able to harvest some corn. You just may not get an ear
Yeah.
where all the kernels are fully formed.
Yeah, sometimes it surprises me how well they actually do when I was worried, like about wind and certain things like that. But I think one of the keys with corn too for most gardeners, especially those small space gardeners who follow us and all of that, is how much space and how much corn you're able to
Yeah,
grow. Now, corn works best if you're able, because that's why they have them in big, huge cornfields. When the
exactly.
wind's
You want a
blowing what
big
way,
block.
it's just blowing pollen all over the place, all over everything. And even on a smaller scale, we still want nice, large blocks of plants growing together so that you're trying to capture as much of that pollen within the
Yeah.
space. But if you do grow some corn in smaller spaces and you only got individual small plants, you might look into some pollen harvesting methods, right? And maybe do some self-pollination on some of those
Yeah.
silks and stuff too that I've seen people do.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
actually
There are
tried a
ways
couple
that
of
you
times
can
myself.
tell. Yeah. You can tell when the plant is getting ready to pollinate. And you can
Mhm.
actually see some of that pollen
Yeah, you just
developing.
see it, it's hanging, it's
Yeah.
there, and or you
And
might
we have
even
a
see
big,
acres of it hanging out, little bits of it, dust, just a
absolutely.
little yellow dust hanging out on the plant. When you start seeing that forming, it's time to maybe go and
Yeah.
get. I've
And
seen
with
people
a
take,
big
like,
block,
paper bags,
you know,
shake it in.
you have a whole bunch of corn plants and you get in there and you just
Mhm.
start shaking everything, even if it's
Oh, even
windy,
yes.
it's going to fall
Or
down
take
on you.
advantage of those, yeah, or take advantage of those moments early on as the pollen's starting to
Yeah.
form
And you can do it at any
on a
time.
still day and really kinda shake them, like you're
Yeah.
saying, is a good
The
idea.
pollen's not going to fall until the pollen is formed.
That's
And
true.
so if
Yeah.
you're out shaking your corn plants before the pollen has developed,
Yeah. It's not
you're
gonna
not
do any
hurting
good.
anything. You're just shaking your corn plants. And
Yeah.
so if that is a concern, yeah, you could go out every day. And then eventually you'll choose the right day where the pollen
Yeah.
is fully mature and
That's a
ready
good
to
idea.
pollinate. Yeah.
Just get out there and shake it up. Shake it up. Definitely. Right on, right on. Okay. Well, anyways, here I got one last thing I was gonna talk to you
Okay.
about here, because this is something that's popped up for us here in our area. I'm trying to grab this up here. I want to show this picture real quick. This right here is the Alameda fire that's
Oh,
popped up here. Just this that peak right there is what we call Roxy Ann here in the Rogue Valley. This kind of overlooks our whole valley there.
okay.
But that fire popped up this week, man.
Oh
Look at that
no.
monster. Look at that monster. This is called the Salt Creek Fire. And
I bet you it's got
yeah,
a lot of people scared after the big fires a couple
It's
years ago.
it's it's yeah, and it will, and especially when it's overhanging your whole. I mean, our whole
Yeah.
town is right. I'm like right in the middle of it, looking up. You know what I mean? So that's right there. It's big, and we get wildfires all the time. This one again too, because
Yeah.
it's
So do
present.
we.
Look at that picture. You know what I mean? Wow,
Wow.
it's right there like that and everything. But this is something that we got, and it's happening every year. I talk about this. I've been actually talking about this over the last several years. Is that it's just almost become this almost semi-normal thing, other than it being dauntingly over top of you right there, is
Yeah.
the smoke that comes along with this. Wildfires in the West. And I know, and I'm sure this is almost a huge situation for you in Colorado as well, throughout the whole West here.
Yeah.
We live in these just monster amounts of woods. They get dried up during these hot summers, and we just get these massive wildfires that start up everywhere in a lot of areas, especially when we're in more populated areas. There's a lot of gardeners. There's a lot of people growing, and they're growing their garden. And when the whole valley here fills up with smoke, and you're out there and you're like, oh man, there's just a ton
Yeah.
of smoke going on. It makes probably a lot of people who are growing their gardens a little bit concerned. Like, how are my plants
Well, and they
dealing with
should be
this?
concerned.
Yeah.
I, I, I think every day this week I've gotten an air advisory warning because of some of the smoke that's blowing in, and so you do have to be careful about being outside working at the same level on a clear day. If you're doing that in smoky conditions, you're breathing in that bad air. So you do definitely have to be careful about it. A couple years ago, I
Yeah,
noticed
on the
we
breathing in that for sure, and being out
yeah
and breathing,
we had
definitely.
big fires in Idaho and Utah that were blowing over the mountains into us, and it was a few weeks of that air air problem, almost like clouds. I mean, it was very smoky, and I noticed my plants were actually beginning to suffer because it was cutting down on the amount of sunlight that they were getting. So it's
Yeah.
not just people; it's the plants as well. When you've got all that smoke in the air, it disrupts a lot of stuff.
It can. The one thing though too, obviously, I think, when it comes to plants, they breathe differently than we do. So those carbons and some of those things are probably a little more beneficial to them than they are for us. So we definitely want to be a little bit more careful about what we're doing when we're breathing out there when it comes to them. I think one of the things I was talking about yesterday, as I was talking, I actually showed this little video that I made, when I first discovered this fire as it was there and all that, but and showed some of the smoke that was lingering. And one of the things that I've talked to some other people about too, in the understanding of one of the bigger dangers for our plants in these sort of wildfire smoke situations are the particles. And the
Yeah.
particles are definitely a danger for us. We should, when it's smoky like that, this is definitely a time to start getting some particle masks on and start making sure you're protecting your own lungs. But our plants don't just breathe in this like air or carbon dioxide and all of that, but they're taking in things through their pores and all of that.
Yeah.
And these small particles are also kind of floating down like a very slow snow in a
Yeah.
way. And they're just
And it can clog
layering
up.
our leaves. Right.
Yeah.
And this is probably where we're seeing a lot of this suffering from our plants,
Yeah.
is that it's these particles that are coming down on them.
Yeah,
Right.
that could definitely happen. So the transpiration process, there's little cells, the stomata cells that will
Yeah.
open and close, and that's where the water vapor escapes through the process of plant transpiration. And so the cell will close to limit that escape. Well, if that cell is clogged up, then the transpiration doesn't happen. Now, most plants have the stomata cells on the underside of leaves, and so it may not be as big an issue, but there are cells on the top of the leaves that can definitely be affected by ash and larger particles that might be falling on them.
hmm Yeah, and in some senses, it's more noticeable with the larger particles, but that's one of the
Mhm.
things that makes the smoke so much dangerous, is that it has very fine particles too,
Yeah.
and it's such an amount of them that though even those little tiny fine particles can add up and build up in a way that
Yep.
we're probably not noticing as much on there. So my biggest recommendation is the same thing too, is like even during that time, get a mask on for one, just like, take the safety precaution for yourself first and foremost, but also, get out there and give those plants a good wash.
Yeah, exactly.
Just wash that stuff, get those plants wet. It's going to be probably hot enough anyways. They're going to probably like that, as we've talked about already, about being, making sure our plants are watered. But in these situations, it becomes just a little bit more important just to really kind of clean those little stomata, those little plant pores, those things
Yeah,
need.
that's a good time to water from above to actually,
Yes.
like I mentioned earlier, I typically am watering the soil because the roots are absorbing the water, but that's a good excuse to water the whole plant. And you're right, give it a wash off any of that ash or anything that might have fallen on the plant.
Yeah. Again, too, it's just kind of scary times, as when we start to look at all of these sort of things coming down, breaking heat records, like you mentioned earlier, too. I mean, this is all the stuff that comes along with it, especially for those of us who are living out in the West like we are. And, we've got, and it's one of the, it's just, it's so tough to see too, being a plant lover, nature lover, and all that sort of stuff too, is that we get to live in Colorado. I can't even imagine. I got to visit. I flew into Denver once for a layover, but I haven't really got to visit the state. But I can imagine it's just as beautiful as all of our other
Oh
states
yeah.
here in the West. Where we just got these
Oh yeah.
amazing, beautiful woods and great hiking trails. I love to go hiking in, and it's just such a bummer to see when you see pictures like I showed there too, and or we get to see
Yeah.
that in these types of fires that are happening to everything going on around us. And but it's just part of the new reality we're living in, and in these new times and all of that, and
Yeah. It's
things we
sad.
have to just kind of adjust to. Right on, right on. Actually, okay, there was one more thing I noticed too, because I told you that was the last thing I was going to talk to you about, but I actually got one more thing, and it's not going to take long at all. Because
Okay.
here's the thing. This last week we had some time off and everything we were doing because I had one really cool thing happen to me. And this was the first for me. And I thought I had to mention this while you were here because I think you understand because you're a grandfather as well too, right?
Yep.
This is my first one,
Oh,
Scott.
congratulations.
Yes, June 28th. This was my
Oh, nice.
little wait, I gotta get this here. Your name. Oh, there she is.
Sure.
Layla Green.
Nice.
How awesome too about that name too, right?
That's nice.
I got the perfect name for a grandkid, Layla Green.
I like
That's
it.
isn't that awesome? Yeah.
I'm actually traveling to see my son later this week for my most recent granddaughter's first birthday. So,
Amazing.
a year from now, you get to
Most
enjoy
recent
that.
too. But man, I'm telling you what, this is, and I don't know if this was the same for you, and this is kind of why I want to mention also why you're here as well, too, because I don't know what it was like on the first one, because this is my first one. So for there was this, all up until this time, it was just it was me and my daughter, or you and your kids, just however many
Yeah.
anybody has, but that's all I've ever kind of looked at life through was just this me and her. And then one of the things that came afterwards was just this amazing reflection of this expansion of my life and just kind of this, wow, wait a minute, it includes this whole other thing. And now my daughter's having these experiences that I had. And I don't know, it's really, I think, even more amazing than and I hate to say it, than when I had my daughter.
Yeah, you don't want to say that out loud, but
It's hard to say, but it's just like, wow. I mean, I thought that was amazing, but right now, just I think it's because I get to combine all of that with this. You know what I mean? And it's just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. My oldest granddaughter and I text every day, and so just having that as well. You're right. It opens up your life to new things that you never imagined would happen. And
I
it's
look at all of the new
wonderful.
garden projects and everything I've got planned for all of this new stuff we want to do with the garden spaces and everything. And now every time I think about them, I'm thinking about, a few years down the line, I'll get to have her there and share and bring her up and develop those stories. And yesterday I had Bevan Cohen on the show, and we were talking a little bit about the idea because he was mentioning that his first memories was with his grandmother in the garden, that sort of thing. And it was like, wow, you know what, now I'm getting to think about those sort of things of her someday down the road sharing some memory about her first memories with her grandfather in the garden and all that. But anyways,
well,
I just had to share that. It's just so much fun right now and enjoyment and everything.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, and try to make as many of those memories as you can, because you never know which ones are going to stick. And decades from now, Layla's first memory of you might be in the garden.
That's just right. And man, so much and great things to look forward to. And again, thank you so much, Scott, for really just taking your time, coming and hanging out with me and having just a fun gardening conversation, answering some gardening questions. I've been really, really enjoying this. And I really, really can't wait to catch up with you next month too.
Absolutely. Well, it's always good to be here. And I hope for everybody, but especially for you and me, at least, the temperatures begin to drop so we can actually get out and enjoy ourselves rather than suffering. But I'll see you next month, and I'll see everybody else. Hopefully everyone will be back and we can do this again.
Oh yeah. Excellent. And not only that too, really, hold the horses 1 second here. Gardener Scott has a link right down below in the description. He does a great live stream. It'll be happening right bright and early in the morning. And so if you didn't get any of your questions answered today, make sure you go to his live stream tomorrow morning on his channel at the Gardener Scott for his live stream every Monday that he does on his channel too, where again, like I said, if you didn't get your question answered here, it's a great way to do it. Go and join over there. And also, as I mentioned too to people at the beginning of the show, I'll mention here in just a few minutes again too, but it's also a great opportunity. Go visit Gardener Scott, go leave a comment on one of his videos or the live stream and tell him that you saw him here on the Let's Get Growing show as we're working to build more community through gardening. Thank you so much, Scott. We'll see you again on your next time here.
Thanks, Enoch.
You got it.
See you next time.
Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with Ivory Organics, where we grow cool plants, and author, Saving the World with the Home Garden. Ivory Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right. Excellent. Another great, awesome conversation with our good friend Scott Wilson over at the Gardener Scott channel. And again, like I said, go down below to the link we have for his channel there. Go over, and I'm sure all of you have already subscribed, but if you haven't subscribed, go subscribe. And again, go leave a comment maybe on one of his recent videos if you've got a moment today or something like that. Or if you didn't get your question answered today, like I said, go and check out his live stream tomorrow morning on his channel at the Gardener Scott channel there for sure. Really great. And like Riverdale Gardens, great chat. Absolutely. It's always fun to be able to get to talk to Gardener Scott. He's just really great. Great wealth of knowledge when it comes to gardening and all sorts of things. And it's just fun to kind of just dig into some gardening conversation with somebody on our Sunday edition here of the Let's Get Growing show. So let's see here. Oh, and Jay put in there. Let's put this up too. Yeah, because I was wondering exactly what time it was. 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So what is that? That is 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I believe. So 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for Gardener Scott's show tomorrow on Monday. And again, tell him that you saw him here on the Let's Get Growing show. Definitely give us a shout out over there as well too. And really great. Let's see. And Jay says, it's amazing how easily he answers our gardening questions. Yeah, exactly. He's just most anything. I mean, I swear there's certain issues that'll come up in my garden, and I will literally go to his channel and just kind of type in there and see if he, whatever it is, and then see if he's got a video on it or something like that. And I'll go check with what he's got to say, and then I'll also, I'm just, I'm a garden nerd in some senses. So I'll go dig in and check out some research and check out other things and all of that. But I'll always check with what he says. And most every single time I find that he's not leading me astray whatsoever. So he's just really a great source for getting your garden growing, especially for new gardeners and all of that. He's someone that if you really want to know some know-how, I try to say, I like to be, as present as I can with garden knowledge, and share what I know best that I know. But I'm only learning from folks like Gardener Scott and other people as well too. And there's a lot of stuff that I don't relay as well. I might not teach as well, or I just might not think up or can think of in a sense because maybe a certain part of something I read about it or something just isn't coming to me right away. You know what I mean? The information isn't just right there for me. So I can't pass it along as well as someone like Gardener Scott can, who just has that information and is ready to go, and he's ready to tell you, this is what it is and what he thinks it is and all of that too. And then, it's really also great too, again, as you notice with the conversation, is that maybe there's something he's talking about, and then I've got a little bit more to add, and we can just really kind of complete maybe that whole thing just a little bit more with some of that too. So that's one of the real fun things I think about having these conversations too with him, is that we can really dig in and get to find out and figure out some of the things, and especially issues that you might be dealing with in your garden. That's what makes this so fun, is that you guys get to come here, come hang out. You guys are having so much fun, having fun conversating with each other and everything, but then you can jump in and leave great comments and questions for us to be able to answer for you here and be a part of that conversation and help us take it even further. There were some great ones here today where you guys jumped in and just gave us a little piece that took some of those questions just to another level and helped us really convey some great information. So I really appreciate everything that you guys all do by coming here and being a part of this each and every week. So I thank you all so much for doing that. And real quick here before we go, I just want to mention about next week, next Saturday. I'm still working on a Saturday show. We'll see. That's still kind of up in the air a little bit. I talked about that a little bit on yesterday's show, but we will be back with our Sunday edition for sure next week, because next Sunday, like today's the second Sunday, and we talk with Master Gardener Scott on the third Sunday of each and every month. We have our monthly gardening book club. In this month's book club, we are talking with gardener Cisco Morris from the Pacific Northwest here. He's written a book called Ooh La La, and it's full of a bunch of great stories, garden tips and hints, and just a bunch of just great stuff. And he's really funny, entertaining, and you do not want to miss out on this conversation next week for our monthly book club. So definitely come and join with us for that as well too. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, also check out yesterday's show with our conversation with Bevan Cohen from smallhousefarm.com and the Seeds and Weeds podcast. Bevan's just got a lot of great knowledge and has written some really great books. We talked a little bit about his new book too, called The Heritage Pantry, Modern Methods of Preserving Food the Old-Fashioned Way. And he was just showing us and actually talking about, and in the book, about a lot about these old methods of preserving some of the food that we're growing in our garden. And it was just a really great conversation. We talked all about seed saving and seed stories, and just it was a great conversation. If you missed that, you definitely want to go back and check that out as well too. That's what we had yesterday. And so, all right, and one more time, because it was mentioned yesterday during the show as well too, because I didn't have a picture of my granddaughter put up, so I got to mention her twice. So one more picture, me holding my granddaughter Layla Green, just that beautiful little girl. And all right, I know we've been talking a lot about it, and I'll probably mention her more in the future and all of that, but it's just a lovely time right now. And I thank you all so much for all of your well wishes and congratulations and all of that sort of stuff. It's just been really, really great. And again, thank you so much for joining with me here today. Okay, everybody. Yeah, there you are. Actually, real quick, Jay says twice Layla Green request. That's right. All right. Oh, and Serena asks, is Bevan Cohen's book going to be featured on a book club presentation? I think this is a great question, Serena, because this brings up something. It's a monthly gardening book club. You know what I mean? And that's a monthly club. And that means that we're doing a gardening book each month. And that only gives us 12 selections a year. Only 12. And you know how many amazing, awesome books there are in the gardening world, and awesome gardening authors that there are, and all of that. So it's really kind of hard in some sense to get everybody into our monthly book club. We're going to try to get some of them, the ones that what we're really featuring right now are just some of these ones that both Mark and I, because Mark, who does our In the Garden segment at the beginning of the show here, is also our co-host for the monthly gardening book club. And these are just things that these are books and book features that we kind of both together, you know, are books that we kind of both kind of have really enjoyed, and that sort of stuff. So when it comes to this one, especially, Cisco is someone we both know. We've both been to his talks. We've been to his talks together, that sort of thing. This is a person that we both really, really enjoy very much. So he had to be a part of all of that. And when it comes down to it, like I said, there's just a ton of other great authors out there like Bevan and all of that too. And I've got a bunch a bunch of them on my list of potential guests for future shows and all of that. So I mean, there's going to be tons of authors who are on that aren't really on our featured monthly book club. We really wish we could. I mean, it would be nice if we did like a weekly book club or something like that, if we were capable of doing something, or trying to manage that sort of thing. And I think there's just more work on that than I'm really capable of doing. But monthly book club for now, and we'll still try to get as many really great, awesome authors onto the show as well too. So we'll be seeing plenty of great books and great authors throughout the show. But definitely come and join with us next Sunday for our monthly book club. And again, thank you all so much for hanging out and joining with me here today for what was just, again, another amazing, awesome show here at Let's Get Growing. And I'll see all of you next week.